The cheapest investment.
Dorian Vale humiliated his wife in front of the most powerful people in the city, not knowing Zuri Carter Vale had already signed the papers that would take his empire away from him. The ballroom at the Sterling Grand Hotel glittered like money had learned how to breathe. Glass chandeliers hung over the room. Camera flashes bounced off polished marble floors. Men in tailored suits laughed too loudly beside women wearing diamonds that looked heavier than their smiles. At the center of it all stood Dorian Vale. He was the kind of man people moved aside for. 38 years old, founder and CEO of Vale Core Systems. A tech billionaire with a cold stare, a sharper tongue, and a reputation for turning failing companies into machines that printed money. That night, every investor in New York wanted a word with him. Every journalist wanted a quote. Every rival wanted him to slip. But Dorian only cared about one thing: control. He controlled the room with a nod, controlled his board with fear, controlled his public image with perfect timing, and for the last 8 months, he believed he controlled his wife too. Zuri Carter Vale stood 3 steps behind him, wearing a deep emerald dress that made her dark skin glow under the hotel lights. Her hair was pinned back neatly. Her face was calm, too calm for a woman who had just heard her husband laugh at her like she was furniture. A senator's wife had looked at Zuri and smiled politely. "Dorian, your wife is lovely. What does she do?" Dorian did not even turn around. "She keeps my mother happy," he said. That was the purpose of the arrangement. The small circle around him laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly enough for a scandal, just enough to cut. Zuri felt the sound land in her chest. She kept her hands folded around her clutch, her wedding ring pressed into her finger like a small warning. The senator's wife looked embarrassed. A junior executive stared into his drink. Dorian raised his glass like nothing had happened. Zuri had learned that about him. Dorian did not need to shout to hurt someone. He did it cleanly, with a sentence, with silence, with the kind of smile that told a person they were beneath his attention. Their marriage had started as a family demand. His mother, Seraphine Vale, was dying slowly from a heart condition and wanted Dorian settled before she agreed to another surgery. Zuri's aunt had worked for the Vale family for years. When Seraphine met Zuri at a charity clinic fundraiser in Brooklyn, she had admired her strength, her quiet dignity, and the way she spoke to everyone like they mattered. Seraphine had chosen Zuri. Dorian had agreed because it solved a problem. No romance, no courtship, no pretending behind closed doors. A legal marriage, a public wife, a private stranger. But Dorian made one mistake from the beginning. He assumed Zuri had entered his world empty-handed. He thought she was poor because she did not perform wealth. He thought she was simple because she listened more than she spoke. He thought silence meant weakness. That night, at the Sterling Grand, he leaned close to Zuri only after the cameras turned toward them. "Smile," he whispered. Zuri smiled. Not for him. For the photograph that would be used against him later. Across the room, a man from Dorian's legal team rushed through the crowd, face pale. Dorian noticed him immediately. His jaw tightened. "What is it?" Dorian asked. The lawyer lowered his voice. "The Hawthorne Group is moving faster than expected. They've gathered more votes." Dorian's eyes went cold. "How many?" "Enough to call an emergency shareholder meeting tomorrow morning." For the first time all evening, Dorian looked shaken. Only for a second. Then the mask returned. He placed his glass on a passing tray and turned away from Zuri. "Get the car." Zuri followed him through the hotel lobby, past revolving doors and waiting photographers. Outside, rain slicked the street black. Sirens cried somewhere near Fifth Avenue. The city looked beautiful when it was wet. It also looked unforgiving. In the back of the town car, Dorian made calls without looking at her. He threatened one board member, flattered another, promised a third a private meeting and a larger role after the vote. Zuri watched his reflection in the window. He was brilliant, no one could deny that. But brilliance without humility had made him blind. At the penthouse, high above Manhattan, Dorian walked straight into his glass-walled office. The skyline burned behind him, towers of light, streets like veins. a city full of people he thought he was smarter than. Zuri stood near the doorway. "Is the company in trouble?" she asked. Dorian did not look up from his tablet. "No." Your lawyer seemed worried. "My lawyer is paid to worry. Maybe another set of eyes could help." That made him laugh. A short, sharp sound. "Zuri, this is not a community center budget meeting." Her face did not change, but something inside her pulled tight. He continued scrolling. "This is a $9 billion hostile takeover. Men who built fortunes before you learned how to read a balance sheet are trying to remove me from my own company." Zuri looked at him for a long moment. Then she said softly, "Men who underestimate women usually lose something important." Dorian finally looked up. His eyes moved over her dress, her calm face, her empty hands. "And women who mistake patience for strategy usually embarrass themselves." Zuri nodded once. Not in agreement, in confirmation. She left him there, surrounded by screens, numbers, and fear he refused to name. Down the hall, inside the guest bedroom she had slept in since the 3rd week of their marriage, Zuri removed her earrings and placed them beside a stack of legal folders. The folders were not decorative. They contained shareholder agreements, acquisition filings, trust documents, wire confirmations, proxy votes. For 6 months, Zuri had been buying pieces of Dorian's empire through a private investment firm called Northbridge Capital. Dorian knew the name. Everyone on Wall Street did. He just did not know who controlled it. Zuri had built Northbridge long before the wedding, using settlement money from a lawsuit her late father had won after being pushed out of a logistics company he helped create. Her father had died before he could rebuild his name. Zuri had done it for him. Quietly, carefully. She had studied law at night, finance in the mornings, corporate governance during lunch breaks at jobs where men spoke over her, and then repeated her ideas louder. By the time Dorian met her, she was already dangerous. Not loud dangerous, patient dangerous. The kind people only noticed when the door locked behind them. Around midnight, her phone buzzed. A message from her attorney appeared. Final voting confirmation secured. Total control, 51.3%. Meeting at 9 a.m. Zuri stared at the message. Her hands trembled once, then stilled. In the next room, Dorian shouted into a phone, "They will not take my company." Zuri closed her eyes. He was right about one thing. They would not take it. She already had. The next morning, Vailcor's headquarters stood like a blade of black glass in Midtown. News vans lined the curb. Employees clustered near security gates, whispering. The stock price had dropped before sunrise. Rumors moved faster than elevators. Inside the top-floor boardroom, the air felt tight. Dorian sat at the head of the long table, dressed in a charcoal suit, his expression hard enough to bruise. Around him sat board members, lawyers, advisors, and nervous executives, pretending their hands were steady. The emergency shareholder vote had one purpose: decide whether Dorian Vail would remain in control. Across the table, representatives from Hawthorne Global waited with quiet confidence. Hawthorne had wanted Vailcor for years. They had watched Dorian weaken his own defenses through arrogance, debt, and enemies he had collected like trophies. But something was wrong. Dorian could feel it. The numbers did not behave. His team had counted votes 3 times. Every version showed the same terrifying gap. A missing block. A decisive block. A block controlled by Northbridge Capital. Dorian leaned toward his chief legal officer. "Where is Northbridge's representative?" The woman swallowed. They confirmed attendance. When? 9 o'clock sharp. Dorian checked his watch. 8:59. The room fell into a silence so complete that even the city below seemed to pause. Before this story takes its biggest turn, viewers who love powerful stories about betrayal, strength, and justice are invited to subscribe, like this video, and comment where they are watching from. Every city has someone like Zuri, quietly surviving what others never see. At exactly 9, the boardroom door opened. Dorian did not look up at first. He was still studying the voting sheet, searching for a way to bend reality. Then the room shifted, not loudly. People just stopped breathing the same way. Dorian raised his head. Zuri walked in. not in the emerald dress from the night before, in a black tailored suit, hair smooth, shoulders back, a leather folder in one hand. Behind her came two attorneys and an older woman Dorian recognized from financial television. Angela Price, founder of Northbridge Capital. Except Angela did not take a seat at the table. She stood behind Zuri. Dorian stared. "Zuri," he said, voice low, "this meeting is private." Zuri walked to the opposite end of the table. "It is," she said. Her voice was calm. That made it worse. Dorian looked around, waiting for someone to remove her. No one moved. The chief legal officer looked down. The board chair cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter Vale is here as the controlling representative of Northbridge Capital." Dorian's face changed so quickly it almost looked painful. "What did you say?" Zuri opened the leather folder and placed a stack of documents on the table. Northbridge Capital holds 51.3% voting control of Vale Core Systems through direct shares, convertible debt, and secured proxy agreements. Her attorney slid copies down the table. "The filings were completed last night," Zuri continued. "The voting rights are active. The documentation has been verified." Dorian stood. "This is absurd." "No," Zuri said. "It is legal." His eyes flashed. "You expect me to believe you did this?" Zuri met his stare. "I expected you not to believe it until it was too late." A murmur moved across the room. Dorian looked at Angela Price. "Who is really behind this?" Angela's expression did not move. "She is." Those two words landed harder than any speech. Dorian turned back to Zuri. For the first time since their wedding, he truly saw her. Not as a burden, not as his mother's wish, not as a woman to place beside him at charity dinners, but as the person holding the knife at the center of his empire. His voice lowered. "You used my name." Zuri's eyes darkened. "No, Dorian. You used mine. You used my face, my patience, my silence. You used me to comfort your mother and polish your image while reminding me every day that I did not belong." He looked away first. That small defeat shook him. But pride recovered quickly. "You have no idea what this company requires." Zuri sat down slowly. "I know what it costs." She looked around the table. Under Dorian, Vale Core created brilliant tools. It also buried complaints, overworked teams, punished dissent, and rewarded fear. The company did not become vulnerable because outsiders attacked it. It became vulnerable because its leader confused domination with leadership. Dorian's hands curled into fists. Some board members looked ashamed. Others looked relieved. Zuri continued. "Effective immediately, this board will vote on restructuring executive control. Dorian Vale will remain as Chief Innovation Officer for a transition period, subject to oversight. He will no longer hold unilateral authority over acquisitions, layoffs, executive compensation, or employee surveillance programs." Dorian laughed, but there was no strength in it. "You are firing me from my own life." Zuri's voice softened, and that softness hurt more. "No, I am removing you from the throne you kept using to step on people." The vote moved quickly after that. Too quickly for Dorian to stop it. One by one, board members raised their hands. Some out of fear, some out of guilt, some because they had waited years for someone to do what they could not. When the motion passed, Dorian remained standing at the head of the table, but the head of the table no longer belonged to him. Zuri did not smile. Victory tasted different when it came after humiliation. It tasted like old pain finally getting a name. After the meeting, Dorian followed her into the executive hallway. Cameras flashed behind glass walls as reporters tried to capture the moment. "Zuri." She kept walking. "Zuri, stop." She turned near the elevator. "What?" His face was pale now. Not weak, but stripped of the performance. "How long?" "Long enough." "Was any of it real?" Zuri almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the question was cruel in its innocence. He had given her nothing, and still expected to be owed truth. "The marriage?" she asked. "The dinners where you left me alone? The nights you told people I was lucky to be near you? The morning your assistant asked if I needed help using the private elevator because she thought I was staff? Dorian flinched. He remembered that morning. He had been standing close enough to hear. He had said nothing. Zuri stepped closer. I waited for you to correct her. I waited for you to look embarrassed. I waited for one sign that there was a person under all that ice. Her eyes shone, but no tears fell. You looked at your watch. The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. Dorian blocked them with his hand. My mother trusted you. Zuri's face changed. For the first time that day, pain broke through. Your mother saw me before you did. The doors tried to close. Dorian moved his hand. Zuri was gone. For 3 weeks, the city fed on the story. Headlines called it a corporate coup, a marriage war, a billionaire betrayal, a Cinderella revenge tale. Zuri hated that one most. She was nobody's fairy tale. She worked 18-hour days cleaning the rot Dorian had ignored. She met engineers who had nearly quit. She reopened investigations into harassment complaints. She canceled a product that collected user data in ways customers did not understand. The stock dipped, then stabilized, then rose. Employees began speaking in meetings again. People who had avoided the top floor started bringing ideas forward. And Dorian was forced to sit in rooms where he was no longer feared. At first, he resisted everything. He challenged her decisions, corrected her language in front of executives, sent long emails questioning strategy. Zuri answered each one with facts. No anger, no personal attacks, just precision. It made him feel smaller than shouting would have. One evening, long after most employees had left, Dorian found her in the company's old server room. It had been converted into a small archive. Dusty glass panels held early prototypes. Photographs showed Veilcore's first office, back when Dorian and 3 engineers worked above a laundromat in Queens. Zuri stood before a framed photo of him at 26, smiling with a kind of hope she had never seen on his face. Dorian stopped near the door. That version of me was broke, he said. Zuri did not turn. He looked happier. He was naive. He looked human. Dorian let the words settle. For once, he did not strike back. He stepped beside her. My father lost everything when I was 19, he said. Bad partners, bad loans, bad pride. Men he trusted smiled while they took his company. I promised I would never be him. Zuri looked at him, and became the men who betrayed him. Dorian swallowed. There it was, a truth without decoration. His eyes moved to the photo. I thought control would keep me safe. It made you lonely, Zuri said. He nodded slowly, like the admission cost him something real. Then he said the words she had never heard from him. I am sorry. Zuri did not answer quickly. Sorry was not a key. It did not open every locked room. But it was the first honest thing he had handed her without asking for something in return. Before Zuri makes the decision that changes everything, viewers who have ever been underestimated, embarrassed, or forced to prove their worth are invited to like this video, subscribe, and comment the word strength if they believe silence can also be power. 2 days later, Seraphine Vale asked to see Zuri. Dorian's mother lived in a quiet brownstone on the Upper West Side, away from the glass towers and cameras. Her home smelled of tea, old books, and fresh lilies. Seraphine was thinner than before, but her eyes were clear. Zuri sat beside her bed. For a while, neither woman spoke. Then Seraphine reached for Zuri's hand. I owe you an apology. Zuri frowned. For what? For putting you in his path. Zuri looked down. Seraphine's fingers were fragile but warm. I thought marriage would soften him, Seraphine said. That was selfish. I saw your strength and mistook it for something I could borrow. Zuri's throat tightened. You were kind to me. That does not erase the harm. Seraphine turned her head toward the window. Outside, traffic rolled by in silver streaks. There is something else. Zuri felt the air change. Seraphine looked back at her. Your father, Daniel Carter, I knew him. Zuri went still. My father? Seraphine nodded. Years ago, before Dorian built Veilcore, Daniel came to my husband for investment. He had a logistics platform that could have changed the industry. My husband admired him. Zuri's pulse began to pound. Seraphine continued carefully. But Dorian's father had debts, dangerous debts. He introduced Daniel to investors he should never have trusted. When they pushed Daniel out, my husband stayed silent because he was afraid. Zuri pulled her hand away. The room seemed to tilt. All her life, she had known her father had been betrayed. She had not known the betrayal had roots inside the family she married into. Seraphine's eyes filled with tears. After my husband died, I found letters, records. I wanted to tell you before the wedding, but I was afraid you would leave. Then I told myself, maybe this marriage could repair what our family helped break. Zuri stood. Her chair scraped against the floor. So you chose me because of my father. I chose you because I admired you, Seraphine said, voice trembling. But yes, I also chose you because I was ashamed. Zuri walked to the window. The city outside looked suddenly cruel. Every humiliation, every cold dinner, every lonely night in that penthouse. It had all been built on something older than Dorian's arrogance. It had been built on a buried debt. Zuri wanted to hate Seraphine. Part of her did, but the old woman's regret was not polished. It was raw, late, but real. Did Dorian know? Zuri asked. No. Zuri turned. Seraphine shook her head. He knew his father lost money. He did not know what happened to Daniel. I hid it from him too. The twist did not free Dorian, but it changed the shape of the story. Zuri had thought she was avenging herself. Now she understood she had also been finishing her father's fight. That night, Zuri returned to the penthouse for the first time in weeks. Dorian was there, sitting in the dark living room, the skyline glowing behind him. He stood when he saw her. Something in her face must have warned him. What happened? Zuri placed a folder on the table. Inside were copies of Seraphine's letters, old contracts, and the names of the investors who had destroyed Daniel Carter's company. Dorian read in silence. Page after page, his face drained of color. When he reached the last letter, his hands shook. I didn't know, he whispered. Zuri believed him. That made it harder. He sat down heavily. My father did this? Your father helped open the door. Dorian covered his mouth with one hand. For the first time, Zuri watched him break without performance. Not because he had lost power. Because he had found shame. I built everything, he said slowly, on top of something stolen. Zuri's voice was quiet. Yes. He looked up at her. What do you want me to do? It was the first time Dorian Vale had asked her that question and meant it. Zuri looked around the penthouse. The cold art, the perfect furniture, the rooms where she had felt invisible. Then she looked back at him. Not what I want, she said. What you owe. The next morning, Valecore announced the creation of the Daniel Carter Fund, a permanent investment program for Black founders and underfunded urban tech entrepreneurs. It was seeded with Dorian's personal shares, not company money. The announcement stunned the market. Then came the second announcement. Dorian Vale would step down from all executive authority after the transition period. He would remain only as a product advisor, with no voting control. The third announcement was smaller. No cameras, no press conference, just a legal filing. Zuri Carter Vale petitioned for separation. Dorian did not fight it. 3 months later, winter settled over New York. The city turned silver at the edges. Steam rose from subway grates. People moved fast through cold streets, carrying coffee, flowers, groceries, secrets. On the top floor of Valecore, Zuri stood at the head of the boardroom table. Not Dorian's old chair. A new one. The room had changed. The walls now held photographs of employees, founders funded by the Carter program, community partners, and early prototypes made by young engineers from neighborhoods investors used to ignore. Zuri listened as a junior developer presented an idea for affordable cybersecurity tools for small clinics. No one interrupted her. No one laughed. No one asked who had let her in the room. Zuri approved the pilot. After the meeting, she stepped into the hallway and found Dorian waiting near the elevators. He looked different, not broken, quieter, humbled in a way that did not ask for applause. "I signed the final transfer," he said. "The fund has everything promised." "Good." He nodded. For a moment, they were just two people standing between what had happened and what could never be fixed. "I am not asking you to come back," Dorian said. Zuri watched him carefully. "I know. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. Not all of it. Maybe I never will, but enough to regret the man I was when you needed me to be decent." Zuri's eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. "Regret is only useful if it protects the next person from your old self." Dorian nodded. The elevator arrived. He stepped inside. Before the doors closed, he looked at her one last time. "You saved the company." Zuri shook her head. "No, Dorian. I saved myself first." The doors closed. Zuri walked back into the boardroom alone. Outside, New York roared beneath her. The same city that had watched her be underestimated now watched her lead. She stood before the window, not smiling for cameras, not waiting to be chosen, not carrying anyone else's shame. For years, men had mistaken her silence for emptiness. But silence had been her workshop. Pain had been her teacher, and every insult had become a brick in the house of power she built for herself. Zuri Carter Vale did not win because she married a rich man. She won because when the world handed her humiliation, she refused to turn it into hatred alone. She turned it into strategy. She turned it into freedom. And by the time Dorian finally understood her worth, she no longer needed him to see it. If this story touched something real, viewers are invited to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who has ever been underestimated. Sometimes the strongest revenge is not destruction. Sometimes it is becoming so free that the people who hurt you can no longer reach the woman they tried to break.